Okay, back to the matter of collecting. I'd like to address my last question to Sebastian. For someone who's thinking about being a collector, who's not seasoned like Bob and Betsy, or a curator who has a mandate to start building a collection at their institution and is just entering the field for the first time, what advice would you offer in regards to connoisseurship, authentication, and how and where to source reliable works of art in this genre?
That's a pretty difficult question to answer. But so what I can say is that I believe that collecting is an organic and an emotional experience that is better that way than calculated. I think most collectors, as Bob said earlier, they don't actually know that they're going to be making a collection when they acquire their first piece. But so everybody's approach is very different. And I feel that that experience is best shared. I think it's very important to have a partner to bounce off ideas with, to talk to. It's difficult to collect as a solitary experience. I think it's much easier if you have a partner who has similar tastes, and you can talk about it and decide what you like about this, or what you find interesting about it, or what it means. And as your collection grows and you begin to see a structure, it's good for the two of you to talk about it and see how that works. The other thing is obvious. When you are hit by the bug, you need to go to as many museum exhibits as possible. You need to go to gallery shows. You need to go to fairs. You need to go to lectures. You need to find out everything there is to know about it. And soon you'll make your own decisions and you'll evolve as a collector. Don't buy something that you can't afford. I wouldn't worry about how expensive things are or whether things are fake or not. I mean, obviously, that's an important thing, but you will learn that as you go forward. And so I think the most important thing is to like what you're collecting. Don't set yourself false goals. It's better to allow it to organically grow, the collection. I think that's as much as I can answer.
Thank you, Sebastian. It's the Japanese painting world is a tricky place, and we've all, I'm sure Feinberg's included, we've all made mistakes, and we've learned really well from our mistakes. But I agree with you, you have to get your foot in the water and make the plunge. And once you do that and do your homework, it becomes incredibly gratifying. So for our last question, I'd like to, of course, go back to Bob and Betsy. And my question to these wonderful collectors, as you see them in an earlier time, how do you pick, I want you to just look at your vast collection and think about the ones that are your absolute favorites. If your house was going in flames and you had to run out, what would you grab and leave the rest? I mean, what are your favorite children? And if you tell us a little bit.
I don't want to look at the paintings. I want to look at us when we were young. Look at that.
Yeah. Aren't they gorgeous? But as Sebastian said, they're a team, and they've always been by, in my experience, no decisions get made without the other, and it's a collective experience. Sometimes one likes one thing more than the other, but there's an adjudication and a balance, and you can see they're a wonderful couple. But you can't get out of that easy, Bob. I want you to answer the question, and I want Betsy's, her personal favorite too, please.
Well, this is going to be hard, Joan, because we both picked the same painting for us, two works actually, as our favorites, not only because of their beauty, but because of the wonderful story of their acquisition. Almost 10 years after we first began purchasing Edo period paintings, mostly from dealers in New York, it became obvious that we would like to get up our courage and make our first trip to Japan if we wanted to find a broad range of good paintings and not see only what had been pre-selected by dealers. In 1982, Bob and I and our 6-year-old daughter, Kara, arrived in Kyoto, tired after a very long flight, but excited and ready for a 3-week stay of exploration and hunting for art. The shift in time woke all of us up extremely early the next morning. By 9 o'clock, with our maps in hand, we were walking down Nawate Dore, an old street in the center of the city's antiques trade. We'd arranged our first appointment with one of the greatest of Kyoto's paintings dealers, Yanagi Shigehiko, the eldest of the 4 Yanagi brothers, all of whom were distinguished paintings dealers. And we were very excited about that, but also a bit worried about how would we be received. Would a young American couple like us be considered serious collectors? Would we be shown good paintings? Or would we be expected to purchase some junk just to establish a future relationship?
Yes, it was an exciting moment for us. Yanagi-san was standing waiting for us inside his old Meiji period gallery. And after some initial small talk in his halting English over little cups of bitter green tea and sweet cakes, he seated us expectantly on couches right in front of his tokonoma. When he himself sat down, his assistants began unrolling scroll paintings and hanging them for us to view, one after another in very rapid succession. And as each one was rolled up and removed, our hopes began to fail. Much to our disappointment, the paintings were all rather ordinary, rather dreary, and really unexciting, a situation that Betsy and I discussed in depressed whispers as I took notes. During the show, Yanagi-san was seated opposite us and watching our reactions. And when the presentation came to an end, he remained there immobile, saying nothing and not looking at us. Not a good sign, I thought. But after another minute of silence, which seemed like an eternity to us, he stood up, dismissed his assistants, and he beckoned us to follow him. He led us up a rickety set of wooden stairs to an unfinished attic storage room, dusty, dark, lit only by a single bulb hanging down from the ceiling. He left us standing there while he rummaged around amongst the screens and paintings stored in the corners. And then, without saying a word, he opened up 2 of the greatest works of Edo period painting we had ever seen. Let's see the slides. First came this pair of incredible 2-fold screens by the 19th century Rimpa painter Suzuki Kiitsu. We recognized the theme immediately as a copy of the pair of famous early Edo period screens of a flock of cranes by the great 17th century artist Ogata Korin, the founder of the Rimpa school, which belonged to the Freer Gallery in Washington. Kiitsu's great teacher Sakai Hoitsu had made several copies of Korin's masterpiece himself. But here in these remarkable screens, the young Kiitsu was expressing his own genius, giving the 300-year-old design a more contemporary grace and a stunning power.
Next picture, please. Yes, well, here we are in Tokyo, standing in front of those same screens at the Edo Tokyo Museum in the spring of 2013. It was the opening of our exhibition in Japan. It was the first venue on the first day. And this exhibition went on to travel to the Miho Museum in Kyoto, and then ended at the Tottori Prefectural Museum. And ultimately, the same exhibition traveled to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where it opened in February of 2014 and stayed there for 6 months. So you can see this had a profound impact on us.
But that wasn't all that Yanagi-san wanted to show us. To top off the Kiitsu screens, he unrolled this amazing ink painting by Tani Buncho, who lived 1763 to 1840. It commemorates an evening the artist spent with friends gathered at nighttime to enjoy viewing a full moon in the Japanese countryside. The painting is huge, over 6.5 feet wide. Its size increases the impact of the beautifully shaded grasses reaching up to caress the moon. And the huge red seal applied over Buncho's calligraphy adds further to the power of this very, very simple but glorious image. We were simply astounded at the incredible level of the works Yanagi-san was offering us. But layered on top of our excitement was the dawning realization that we had passed a crucial test. On the first day of our first visit to Japan, a great Japanese dealer was clearly accepting us into the ranks of serious collectors of Japanese art. The memory of that supremely important initial success adds to our joy each time we see these two acquisitions, which, of course, have become the two signature works of our collection. Joan?
Absolutely. I've been to your home, your beautiful home, so many times. And while you are religious about rotating your collection, this painting seems to be there at least 60 to 70% of the time it's on view, over your couch in your living room. And I so associate this painting with the Feinberg home and your wonderful hospitality. So this painting for me too is one of the high notes of your collection. Thank you. So that is, I must thank our panelists, such a distinguished group of lovers of Japanese art, scholars, caretakers, dealers, and of course, collectors. Thank you all for your time and your efforts to bring this Shuttered collection to the forefront of our delighted fans. As this panel has been recorded, my team will be editing it and putting it available on YouTube through our website. And of course, if Harvard wants to put it on their website as well, so you can come back and listen to these erudite and engaging comments. Once again, I suggest to you to get on your computers and order the first book, which is available, and we'll stay tuned. I don't know if you can order the second book in preview or not, Rachel. There was a time I think you could order it in advance for whenever it does come out, but please think about doing so. And thank you all for being here. But before I close, I think we have a couple questions, and I'll turn the floor over to Chelsea, who's handling that aspect. I think they're having an echo problem in my gallery because there's too many people on the screen. I believe the question was to Bob and Betsy about why Harvard. I mean, you did sort of answer that when we talked about the Hokusai painting, but I think there's more to it than simply Kyo and his students.
Well, I think the idea that that the collection would serve. Harvard offered us three real aspects that were important to us in terms of what would happen to the collection in the future. The first was obviously that we wanted it available to the public in a carefully administered space. We also wanted to be sure that it would be physically taken care of well, and Harvard, of course, can do that easily, but that it should also be available to other museums to, should they wish to borrow the paintings. And not just American museums, but clearly, if you're buying and taking paintings out of a country that has produced them, you would want them to be able to go back to that country should any museum there wish to see them. And so it was important to us that, that they go to an institution that would allow that to happen. And then ultimately, of course, there's the question of could we make sure that we were giving how would you say it? You were giving the opportunity to students of Japanese art to work not from slides on a screen in a darkened room where, in my experience, half the people immediately fall asleep as soon as the lights get turned off. But also to have the ability to see the actual painting and see its texture and see its size and see its colors in absolute reality. The fact that I went there and got a degree in chemistry in 1961 adds, of course, to the sense that Harvard, having given me an amazing 4-year experience, I felt it would be great for us to be able to give something back to that fabulous institution. When I was there and passing the museum every day on my way to the labs, it never occurred to me to stop into the museum, which in those days was essentially off-campus thing, despite the fact that it was just across the street from the yard. Nowadays, with the new museum and the way the museum is thought, is being administrated and is being projected into the life stream of the whole university, it simply seemed so logical to us to put it into that stream of consciousness and make it available to everybody in the university, as well as to the general public.
I would just like to say that, you know, our experience of having students come from all kinds of institutions, including from Japan. Scholars brought students to our home whom we met 25 years later with pictures saying, I was at your house when I was a student, and they were now curators in Japan. It was that kind of experience that we had. We loved that experience, and we felt that our painting should be in a place where people had opportunity, and that isn't necessarily the same thing in a museum as far as our experiences are concerned. So that's why we chose the university setting.
Well put.
I think that probably answers that individual's question beautifully. And I can say, as a former graduate student at Columbia, the accessibility in those days of Marion Jackson Burke's collection was seminal in convincing me to leave academia to be a dealer, because the excitement and the joy of handling art in your hands firsthand was much too seductive. So lucky Harvard, and thank you, Harvard, for promising to make the collection so accessible to the public and to students across the globe. Thank you all for being here. This is the third and final of our Shuttered Museum exhibitions. Let us hope and pray this is not a subject that ever has to be done again, that we will no longer have any further Shuttered exhibitions once we reopen, and we can go on with lives in a sort of a new way. Just a little information of what we will be doing going forward. I'll be switching gears, going back to ceramics with live conversations with artists who unfortunately cannot come to New York, but will be communicating with us via Zoom from Japan. Two wonderful father-son teams from the Tajimi area, and we look forward to those events, and I want you to stay tuned and feel free to communicate at any point in time if you want to get on our list for those events. Thank you all. Sorry we ran a little bit long, but I hope you enjoyed this half as much as I did. And thank you again to our wonderful panelists. Good night.
Thank you.